author's POV. The penthouse was the kind of quiet that made small mistakes sound like crimes. Floor-to-ceiling glass stared down at the city, the lights below blurred by rain that stitched thin lines across the windows. Inside, everything was sharp angles, marble, chrome, silence. Even the air smelled expensive. Clean linen, faint cologne that clung to the hallway like a memory that refused to soften. In the laundry room, tucked behind the glossy kitchen, Y/N stood with a designer shirt laid flat on the ironing board like a sacred thing. The tag inside the collar read a name that might as well have been a warning. She'd watched Jungkook peel it off his shoulders earlier with the same careless precision he used for everything: meetings, contracts, people. She inhaled slowly. Press, lift, smooth. She'd learned the rhythm of being useful in this house, anticipating needs, erasing her existence, trying not to leave fingerprints on anything that belonged to him. The iron hissed as it glided. Steam rose, ghost white against the sterile lighting. Y/N's fingers trembled, but she forced them steady. If she did this right, if she did anything right, maybe tonight he wouldn't look through her like she was another piece of furniture. A notification pinged on her phone across the counter. Instinctively, her eyes flicked just one glance. A message from the grocery delivery. Out of stock on your requested tea. Substitute. Her thumb reached for it, mind already calculating what Jungkook preferred, what was safe, what wouldn't cause a frown. And the iron stayed down 1 extra second, maybe 2. The smell hit first, sharp, acrid, unforgiving. Y/N's breath caught. Her hand snapped back to the handle, lifting it too fast, too panicked. The fabric beneath had puckered, darkened. A cruel brown bruise spreading across pristine white. No, no, no. Her voice came out thin, like it didn't deserve air. She stared at the damage, heart pounding loud enough to fill the room. She tried to smooth it with her palm, as if warmth and pressure could undo a burn, as if the house ran on miracles. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, not the soft ones of a housekeeper, not the careful ones of someone who belonged here only by contract. Heavy, decisive, unhurried. Jungkook appeared in the doorway, suit jacket already off, sleeves rolled up with the careless elegance of a man shedding burdens that weren't his. His tie was loosened, the top button undone, small rebellions against a world that bent to him anyway. His eyes, dark and tired, flicked to the ironing board, then to the shirt, then to Y/N. Something tightened in his face. Not surprise, not curiosity, just the immediate, cold accounting of loss. Is that mine? He asked. Y/N swallowed. Yes. I was ironing it, and there was a message. And Jungkook crossed the room in 3 strides. The rain beyond the windows seemed louder as he reached for the shirt, like he couldn't trust her hands with it anymore. He held it up, eyes scanning the burn mark, jaw clenching so hard it looked painful. This is... He let out a short laugh, humorless. Do you even know what this cost? Y/N's throat felt too small. I can replace it. Oh, with what? His gaze lifted, sharp as a blade. Your allowance. The one you don't even touch unless you ask permission like a child. Her cheeks burned hotter than the fabric. I'm sorry. It was an accident. An accident, he repeated, as if testing the word for weight. In my life, accidents are expensive. She flinched. She couldn't help it. The way he said my life, like she was a guest, like her presence didn't count as part of anything. "I'll fix it," she whispered, and her hands curled into fists at her sides so he wouldn't see them. Shaking, Jungkook tossed the shirt back onto the board. It landed wrong, collar crumpling, the burn mark exposed like a wound no one could ignore. "Always fixing something," he said, voice flat. "Or trying to." Y/N forced herself to hold his gaze. "I'm trying to be a good wife." The words tasted bitter, like she'd swallowed metal. Jungkook's eyes flickered, just once toward the ring on her finger. Gold, perfect, purchased, the symbol of a deal that looked beautiful from far away. He exhaled through his nose. "Good wives don't ruin things." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. He stepped closer, and for a second, she felt that familiar, confusing pull. How his proximity could still make her heart misbehave, even when he treated her like she was nothing. The air around him smelled like rain-soaked wool and expensive cologne, and distance. His voice dropped, colder. "Honestly, Y/N, you're useless." The word hit like a slap, no worse, because a slap faded. A word like that stayed. It crawled into every space she'd been trying to fill with effort and hope. And quiet devotion. Y/N's eyes stung instantly. She blinked fast, refusing to let the tears fall where he could see them. "I'm not," her voice cracked. She cleared her throat. "I'm not useless." Jungkook's expression didn't change. That was the worst part. Like he'd said it the way someone stated the weather. "You had one simple task." "It's not simple if you," she started, then stopped. Because what was the point? He wouldn't hear the rest. He never did. A silence swelled between them, thick and ugly. The city lights outside flickered, as if even the skyline wanted to look away. Jungkook picked up his phone from the counter, checking something, an email, a message. A world that mattered more than this room. His thumb moved with the same efficiency he used to shut her out. "I have an early meeting," he said, already turning away. "Don't touch my clothes again. We'll have someone competent handle it." Competent, not her. He left the laundry room without another glance, footsteps fading down the hall toward the bedroom they shared in name only. Y/N stood frozen, staring at the ruined shirt, then at the empty doorway. Her chest felt hollow, like something had been scooped out cleanly. She reached up, touching her throat, as if the word had physically lodged there. Y/N pav. Useless. She'd been called worse in childhood by people who had nothing. But somehow this man with everything made it feel like the universe confirming her deepest fear, that she didn't belong in marble and glass. That love wasn't part of the contract, that she was here to serve a role. And even that, she failed. Her vision blurred. She didn't wipe her tears. She let them fall silently, because even her crying felt like it might stain something. She picked up the shirt with careful hands, as if it could still punish her. The fabric was warm in spots, crisp in others, the burn mark rough under her fingertips. She whispered to the empty room, barely audible. "Okay," as if she was agreeing with him, as if she'd learned that sometimes survival meant swallowing the truth. Then she folded the shirt neatly, ruin and all, and carried it toward the bedroom, each step feeling like she was walking deeper into a life that didn't want her. A/N. The house stays spotless. People don't authors pav. The bedroom was dim, curtains half drawn against the storm outside. Jungkook's side of the room looked untouched. Suit hung precisely on the chair, watch placed on the dresser like an offering to routine. Y/NS side had small signs of trying, skincare bottles lined up, a book she never finished, a sweater folded twice because she couldn't decide if it belonged in the closet or on the bed. She entered quietly, the ruined shirt folded in her arms like evidence. Jungkook was at the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone, face lit by the cold glow of a screen. When he glanced up, his gaze slid past the shirt and landed on her eyes, red-rimmed, shining, his brow furrowed, irritation flashing. "Are you going to cry now?" Y/NS shoulders tightened. No, but her voice betrayed her. Small, thin, like she was shrinking to fit the space he allowed. Jungkook stood, pulled open a drawer, and took out another crisp white shirt, new, unworn, still folded in a luxury box. He didn't look at her as he laid it out, as if replacing the ruined one erased the moment. "You should sleep," he said. "We don't need this drama." Drama. A burnt shirt was drama. Her hurt was drama. Y/N pressed her lips together until they hurt. I'll call the brand tomorrow. I'll pay for a replacement." He finally looked at her then, eyes narrowing. "You'll pay? With what? Don't be ridiculous." A laugh bubbled in her throat, sharp, almost hysterical, because the absurdity of her life suddenly felt too loud to keep inside. She swallowed it down. "I'll figure it out." Jungkook's gaze flicked over her, taking in her wet lashes, her trembling hands, the way she held herself like she was bracing for impact. He didn't soften. "You always do," he said, tone edged with something like contempt. "You're good at enduring." She flinched again, because it sounded like a compliment in someone else's mouth. In his, it was a verdict. Y/N moved toward the closet, placing the ruined shirt on a shelf, hidden behind his suits where she hoped it wouldn't be seen. Her hands shook so hard she nearly dropped it. Y/N pav. "Don't touch my clothes again." The words echoed with the same finality as a slammed door. She turned away quickly, afraid if she looked at him too long, she'd beg. Not for love, she'd stopped hoping for that, but for basic kindness, for him to see her as human, not a service that came attached to his last name. She walked into the bathroom and closed the door gently. The lock clicked, soft but decisive. Then she fell apart, her hands clamped over her mouth to muffle the sound. Her shoulders shook. Tears slid down her face faster than she could wipe them away. She leaned over the sink, forehead pressed to the cold marble, and let the quiet swallow her. She remembered signing papers, remembered how the lawyer's pen felt heavier than it should have. Remembered Jungkook's calm voice. "It'll be easier this way. You'll be taken care of. Just don't expect more." She had nodded like she understood, like she was strong enough to live without more. But she'd wanted more anyway, a warmth in his eyes, a hand on her shoulder that wasn't guiding her out of the way, a goodnight that sounded like it mattered. Instead, she had this, a ring that felt like a shackle some nights, and a word that now lived under her skin. Useless. Her stomach twisted. She slid down the cabinet, sitting on the bathroom floor, arms wrapped around her knees, like she could hold herself together. By force, minutes passed, maybe an hour. Time didn't behave when you were hurting. Finally, she stood, washed her face, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were puffy. Her mouth was pressed into a line too tight for someone her age. She practiced a neutral expression, the one that kept her safe. When she opened the door, Jungkook was in bed, facing away. The lamp on his side was off. The room was shadowed, quiet, except for rain tapping the glass. N climbed in carefully, keeping to her side. The space between them felt like a canyon. She lay staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing, steady, controlled, like he could fall asleep on command. Like nothing had happened, her chest ached with the urge to speak, to ask, "Why are you like this?" But she knew the answer would be colder than silence. So she stayed quiet. And in the dark, a decision began to form, not fully shaped, but present like a bruise you couldn't ignore. If she was useless here, maybe she didn't have to stay /N. Sometimes leaving doesn't start with a suitcase. It starts with a heart that finally stops begging. Authors Pav. Morning came pale and sharp. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean. But the penthouse still felt heavy with last night's words. Jungkook was already dressed when Y/N woke. Another suit, another perfect tie, another face set into professional indifference. He stood by the window, phone to his ear, speaking in a low voice about acquisitions and deadlines. His world, intact Y/N, moved quietly, making the bed even though he never noticed, smoothing the duvet like she could iron out the ache inside her. When he hung up, he didn't look at her. "I'll be back late," she nodded. Okay, no apology. No mention of the shirt. No acknowledgement of the way her eyes still looked tired. He walked toward the door, then paused, as if remembering something. He reached into his pocket and placed a credit card on the dresser. "For groceries," he said, "and whatever you need." The card looked harmless, glossy, powerful. It also looked like hush money. Y/N stared at it. "I don't want." Jungkook cut her off with a glance. "Don't start," he left. The door clicked shut. Silence flooded in, the kind that made her ears ring. Y/N stood there for a long time, staring at the card. Then she picked it up and held it between her fingers, feeling the weight of what he thought care was. Money instead of warmth. Provision instead of presence. Y/N Pav. He thinks he can buy quiet. And maybe she'd been letting him for too long, because it was easier than admitting she was lonely in a home big enough to echo. She walked to the closet and pulled out a small suitcase, the one she'd brought when she moved in. It had been tucked away like a relic of a life she wasn't supposed to miss. Her hands trembled as she opened it. She didn't pack everything, just essentials. Documents, clothes that were hers, a photo she'd hidden in a book, her and her mother, smiling in a small kitchen that smelled like spices and laughter. She paused at the jewelry drawer. The ring sat in its velvet slot, catching light like a lie. Her throat tightened. Taking it off felt impossible. Leaving it on felt worse. She slid it off slowly, finger suddenly bare and strangely cold. She placed it back in the box with careful precision. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her hand as if she didn't recognize it. The housekeeper arrived mid-morning, a soft knock, polite footsteps. "Madam," the woman called gently. "Do you need anything?" Y/N inhaled, steadied herself. "Could you please call a driver for me? I need to go out." The housekeeper nodded. "Of course." Y/N almost said thank you, almost added I'm leaving. But the words felt too big to hand to someone else. She went to the kitchen and made tea, hands moving on autopilot. The kettle whistled, sharp and accusing. She sipped slowly, staring out at the city in another life. She might have been happy here in another life. Jungkook might have smiled at her like she wasn't an obligation. But this was the life she had, the one where her husband called her useless over a shirt. Her phone buzzed a message from Jungkook's assistant. Mr. Jeon asked if you could attend the charity gala next week. Dress fitting is scheduled today at 3 p.m. Y/N stared at the text until her vision blurred again. He wanted her to play wife in public, to wear silk and smile, and stand by his side like a trophy. While in private, he couldn't even offer kindness. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Then she typed, slowly, "I can't." She hit send before she could change her mind. The driver arrived. Y/N took her suitcase and walked out of the penthouse with her shoulders squared, heart shaking inside her ribcage like a trapped bird in the elevator. She stared at her reflection in the mirrored wall, pale face, determined eyes. A woman trying to be brave. The doors opened to the lobby end as she stepped out. Her phone rang. Jungkook, her breath caught. Her thumb hovered. She let it ring again. She let it ring on the third call. She answered, voice steady only because she had no choice. "Hello." There was a pause. Then Jungkook's voice, low, controlled, but not calm. "Where are you?" Y/N's fingers tightened around the phone. "Out with a suitcase." His tone sharpened, like he'd already pieced it together. "Don't lie to me." She swallowed hard. "I'm not lying." Another pause, the kind that meant he was choosing his next words carefully. "Come home." He said home. The word sounded wrong in his mouth. Y/N's eyes stung, but she kept her voice firm. "I don't think I can." His breath came through the line, audible. "This is because of last night. It's because of everything," she whispered. The line went silent, then quieter, dangerous in its restraint. "Where are you going?" Y/N closed her eyes. "Somewhere I'm not useless." She hung up before he could answer. And for the first time since she married him, the silence that followed felt like hers. A/N. Regret doesn't arrive gently. It kicks the door in when you finally realize what you've broken. Author's POV. Jungkook stood in the middle of a boardroom that suddenly felt too small. A dozen executives stared at him, waiting for him to continue the presentation. He'd paused mid-sentence. The screen behind him displayed numbers that used to make his pulse steady. Now all he could see was the image in his mind. Y/N's trembling mouth, her wet lashes, the way she held herself like she expected pain, and the word he'd thrown at her like it was nothing. Useless. His phone buzzed again. Another missed call. Another message he didn't open. His assistant whispered, "Sir, should we?" "Pause," Jungkook snapped, and the room froze. He walked out without explanation. In the elevator, his jaw clenched so hard it ached. He told himself she was being dramatic. He told himself she'd come back. She always stayed. That was her role. That was the agreement. But something in his chest didn't believe his own logic. He drove himself home, ignoring the driver, ignoring protocol, ignoring the image he'd built of himself as a man who never lost control. The penthouse door opened to silence to much silence y/n. He called, voice rougher than he expected. No answer. He walked through the rooms, each step making his pulse louder. Kitchen spotless, living room untouched, her slippers not by the couch where she always left them. He entered the bedroom. The bed was made. Perfect. Too perfect. Then he saw it, her jewelry box open, the ring missing from her finger. He hadn't noticed before, because he hadn't looked. He opened drawers. The ones on her side were emptier. The closet gaps where her clothes had been, his stomach dropped. He moved faster, pulling out shelves, checking the bathroom cabinets like she might be hiding in plain sight. Then he found it on the dresser. A small velvet box. He opened it. The ring sat inside like an accusation for a moment. Jungkook couldn't breathe. Jungkook Pav. She left it, not thrown, not slammed down, placed carefully, like she still respected him more than he deserved. His hands shook as he closed the box. Anger flared first, hot, instinctive. How dare she leave without permission? How dare she disrupt his carefully controlled life? Then guilt followed, darker, heavier, because she wasn't property. And he'd made her feel like she was his phone lit up, his assistant again. A text this time. Dress fitting, canceled. Mrs. Jeon said she can't. Mrs. Jeon, his throat tightened. He'd wanted her at the gala like a symbol. Proof he was stable, respectable, unshakable. But she wasn't a symbol. She was a person he'd ignored until she disappeared. He looked around the room, seeing it differently for the first time. The emptiness wasn't elegant. It was lonely. He thought of his father's voice, cold, unforgiving. People are investments. If they don't add value, cut them loose. He'd sworn he'd never be like him. Yet last night, he'd sounded exactly the same. Jungkook moved to the closet and found the ruined shirt tucked behind his suits. He pulled it out, fingers brushing the burn mark. The fabric was stiff. Ugly dot, it shouldn't matter, but it had mattered enough for him to break her. He heard himself saying it again, as if replaying would let him undo it. You're useless. His jaw clenched, eyes burning. No, he muttered to the empty room. No. He stopped, because apologies didn't come naturally to him. He didn't have practice. His father had raised him on achievement, not tenderness. His phone buzzed again. This time, a location ping from the driver service the household used, a trip record. A destination, a small apartment complex across town. Not luxurious, not guarded. The kind of place that smelled like cooking oil and neighbors' laughter. A place she might actually breathe. Jungkook grabbed his coat and keys. Heart hammering, he drove too fast. Hands tight on the wheel, rain-slick roads reflecting city lights like broken glass. His mind raced with images. Y/N alone, crying, afraid, convinced she had no right to take up space. He arrived and parked, barely shutting the door before he was striding toward the entrance. The hallway was narrow, painted a tired beige. He could hear a TV playing behind one door, a baby crying behind another. He reached the apartment number listed on the trip record. He He knocked silence, he knocked again. Harder finally. The door opened a crack /N stood there in an oversized sweater, hair loose. Eyes tired, but dry, like she'd cried all her tears already and had nothing left to give him. Her gaze flicked over him. Expensive coat, tense posture, the storm of him filling her small space. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice steady, in a way that scared him more than tears. Jungkook swallowed. "Come home." Y/NS mouth tightened. Why? The question wasn't just about the penthouse. It was about everything. Jungkook stared at her, throat constricting. "Jungkook Pav, because I'm losing you." Because the silence in that marble house finally sounded like punishment. Because he'd thought control was safety. But it was just another kind of cruelty. He exhaled, voice rough. "Because I shouldn't have said what I said." Y/N's eyes narrowed slightly. "Which part?" His chest clenched. "All of it." She didn't open the door wider. "That doesn't change what you think of me." "I don't," he started, then stopped, because he had acted like he thought she was lesser. Like she was convenient. Y/NS voice softened, but not kindly. "You don't even know me, Jungkook." The use of his name, no honorific, no careful distance, hit him hard. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then tell me." Y/N's eyes glistened for the first time. I'm tired. I'm tired of trying to earn basic respect." Jungkook's hands curled at his sides. He wanted to reach for her, but he didn't deserve that comfort. "I can change," he said. The words foreign. Y/N laughed quietly, and it broke something in him because it wasn't amused. It was exhausted. "You don't change for people like me." His gaze snapped to hers. "People like you," she lifted her chin. "Someone you married for convenience. Someone you keep around because it looks good." Jungkook's breath caught. The hallway felt too tight, too public, too exposed. He lowered his voice further. "I didn't marry you because you look good." Y/N's eyes searched his face, suspicious. Then Jungkook hesitated. And for the first time, the cold CEO mask slipped, not dramatically, not romantically, but in a small, human fracture. He whispered, "Because you looked at me like I wasn't my father." Y/N went still. Jungkook's throat tightened, and I hated that it mattered. The door remained half open, her hand still on the edge like a boundary. Her voice came quiet. "That's not an apology." Jungkook nodded once sharply, like accepting a blow. "You're right." He took a breath that felt like swallowing pride. "I'm sorry," he said, and this time the words weren't clean. They were raw. "I'm sorry I called you useless. You're not. You never were." Y/N's lashes trembled. She looked away, blinking hard. Jungkook's voice dropped further, almost pleading. "Let me fix this." Y/N's gaze returned to him, guarded, wounded, brave. How Jungkook didn't have a perfect answer, so he offered the only honest thing he had. "By starting with the truth," he said, "even if it makes me look ugly." Y/N's fingers tightened on the door. And then, finally, she opened it wider, just enough to let him see the small apartment behind her. Not an invitation, not forgiveness, but a crack in the wall/N. Love doesn't erase damage. It learns how to hold the broken parts gently. Author's Pav. The apartment smelled like instant noodles and lemon soap. A mismatched rug sat crooked by the couch. There was a small plant by the window, leaves reaching toward light like it still believed in growth. Jungkook stepped inside carefully, as if loud movement might shatter what little progress he'd made. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded too final and didn't offer him a seat. She leaned against the counter instead, arms crossed over her chest like armor. Jungkook took off his coat, folding it neatly over his arm out of habit, control disguised as politeness. He looked around once, then back at her. "You live here?" he asked. "For now," Y/N said. "It's my friend's place. She's out of town." Jungkook nodded, jaw working like he wanted to say something and didn't know how silence stretched. Then he spoke, voice low. "My father used to measure people like numbers." He swallowed. "He'd tell me affection was weakness, that if someone needed you, they were manipulating you." Y/N's expression didn't soften, but her eyes sharpened, listening despite herself. Jungkook continued, words stiff at first, then loosening as if the truth demanded air. "When I was a teenager, my mother tried to leave him. He made sure she couldn't. Not with threats, with contracts, money, reputation." His mouth tightened. "She stayed until she stopped being her." Y/N's arms tightened around herself. "That's horrible." Jungkook let out a breath. "It taught me something wrong. That relationships are bargains. That you keep your hands clean by keeping your heart out of it." He looked at her, eyes dark, honest in a way she'd rarely seen. "And then you showed up," he said. "You were careful, kind. You didn't ask me for things. You didn't try to win anything." His voice roughened. "It made me feel exposed." Y/N's throat bobbed as she swallowed. "So you punished me." The words landed like a verdict. Jungkook didn't deny it. He nodded once, shoulders tense. "Yes." A long silence followed, heavy, real. Then Y/N stepped forward, just a little. "Do you know what it feels like?" she asked quietly. "To live with someone who looks at you like you're always on probation." Jungkook's gaze held hers. "No," he admitted, "but I'm starting to." Y/N's eyes glistened again. "Last night, I wasn't crying because of a shirt." Her voice cracked. She steadied it. "I was crying because I realized I could disappear from your house, and the only thing that would change is the laundry." Jungkook's face tightened, pain flickering, real, immediate. Jungkook Pav. She really believed that, and he'd given her every reason to. His chest hurt, in a way meetings never caused, in a way money couldn't solve. He stepped closer, slow. "I noticed," he said hoarsely, "the second you weren't there. It felt like the whole place was wrong." Y/N's laugh came out shaky. "That's not romantic, Jungkook." "Not trying to be," he said. "I'm trying to be honest." She studied him, like she was searching for a trick. "Honest would have been stopping before you said it." Jungkook flinched. "I know." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet ring box. He didn't open it. He just held it out, palm up, like an offering he wasn't entitled to. "Not asking you to put it back on," he said. "I'm asking you to choose. Not because of a contract. Not because it's convenient. Because you want to." Y/N's eyes dropped to the box, then back to his face. Her voice was small. "And if I don't?" Jungkook's throat tightened, but he forced the words out anyway. "Then I'll let you go." The sentence looked like it cost him something. Y/N's breath caught. She turned away, walking to the window. Outside, The city moved on cars, lights, people living lives that didn't feel like negotiations. Her shoulders shook once. She wiped at her cheek quickly. When she turned back, her eyes were wet, but steady. "I don't know how to trust you," she said. Jungkook nodded. "Then don't yet." He took another step, stopping at a respectful distance. "Let me earn it." Y/NS brows pulled together. "How?" Jungkook's jaw tightened, determination settling in. "No more performing. No more pretending this marriage is fine, because it looks fine." He set the ring box down on the counter between them, neutral ground. "I'll go to therapy," he said bluntly, like making a deal with himself. "We'll rewrite the terms, real terms." His eyes held hers. "You'll have your own accounts, your own choices. If you want to work, you work. If you want to study, you study. If you want space, you take it." Y/NS lips parted slightly, surprised. Jungkook swallowed. "And I will never call you that again." His voice dropped raw. "Because you're not useless. I was cruel." A beat of silence. Then Y/N stepped closer, her hands trembling as she reached for the box. Not the ring, just the box. She picked it up, held it for a moment, then set it back down gently. "I'm not coming back tonight," she said. Jungkook's heart clenched, but he nodded. "Okay. And I'm not promising anything," she added, voice firmer. "You don't get to hurt me and then fix it in a day." "I know," he said. "I don't deserve that." Y/N's eyes softened a fraction, just a fraction, like the first thaw after a long winter. But then her expression tightened again, as if remembering something important. "You need to understand," she said, voice quiet but sharp, "that when you said that word, it didn't just hurt. It confirmed every fear I've been fighting since I walked into your life." Jungkook's eyes burned. He nodded slowly, like each word was sinking into him. "I understand," he whispered, "and I'm sorry you had to fight alone." Y/N's breath trembled. She looked down, then back up. "Leave," she said softly. "Before I change my mind for the wrong reasons." Jungkook froze. Y/N, her eyes glistened. "Please." Jungkook's throat worked. He nodded once, then moved toward the door, each step heavy. At the doorway, he paused and looked back. "I'll be here," he said. "Not outside your door, not invading your space." His voice cracked slightly. "Just here, when you're ready." Y/N didn't answer with words, but she didn't slam the door either. She held it gently as he stepped into the hallway. And for a second, their eyes met. Two people standing on opposite sides of a marriage that could still become something real if they stopped treating love like a transaction. The door clicked, shut. Y/N leaned her forehead against it. Eyes closed, breath shaky. Y/N Pav. He said he'd let me go. And somehow, that was the first time she'd felt like he actually saw her as a person. Her hand drifted to her bare finger. The skin looked unfamiliar without gold. She didn't put the ring back on, but she also didn't throw it away in her mind. She walked to the counter and stared at the velvet box, chest tight. Maybe the story wasn't over. Maybe this time, if it continued, it would be written by choice, not obligation. A/N. Sometimes a happy ending isn't a grand apology. It's the first honest step toward becoming safe for each other.